Hey everyone, welcome back to the Graveyard Shit podcast. We have got something good for you today. Yeah, there it is. Bride of Re-animator. What can you say about this movie? It's like, some bright spark said, you know what? Re-animator wasn't over the top enough. Let's do. And they might have been crazy, but I tell you what, they're crazy brilliant. Because very rarely do you get a movie that, works as well as the original. And you get that here. So,
Well, you want a quick synopsis real quick?
Yep, go for it.
Just read this, just a piece. I won't read the whole thing. On the back of the Arrow release, it has been 8 months since the bloody massacre at Miskatonic Medical School. Unperturbed by the disastrous outcome of his previous meddling with the dead Dr. West, again played by Jeffrey Combs, thank God for that, continues his research into the phenomenon of reanimation, only this time he plans to create life, starting with the heart of his young protege, Dan's dearly deceased Meg Halsey, of course, Barbara Crampton.
Yep.
Surely nothing could go wrong. Now, when you have a freaking smorgasbord of a special effects feast as you do here with all the freaking multiple K&B, Screaming Mad George, freaking Wayne Toth on working with John Carl Beekler's company, who would go on to, of course, direct Friday 7. And I don't know if there's any movie that has that many pieces of a special effects crew like this. And they all had different aspects of what they brought to the film, but that is remarkable. I mean, just having K&B in its totality is remarkable.
Yeah, definitely.
And in 90, all three were still part of K&B. So, you got, Kurtzman, Berger, Nicotero, and all they bring. And then, of course, I always forget about Wayne Toth. I had totally forgot, but I was, when I was rewatching this the other night, I was letting the credits roll, and all of a sudden I saw Wayne Toth's name pop. I'm like, what? Well, he worked underneath the magical media industry, I think, which was Beekler's company. Wayne Toth. And Wayne Toth, man, I mean, of course, if you don't know, Rob Zombie's right-hand man, and all his, House of a Thousand Corpses right up through Lords of Salem. And but Wayne Toth goes way back. I mean, I'm pretty sure he even worked on Return of the Jedi.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, he was part of a lot. His filmography is huge, but near and dear to my heart, just because of Rob Zombie leaned on him hard.
Wayne Toth is one of the reasons why, like the early 90s, like to early 2000s, like Full Moon stuff was so fun. He did a lot of the stuff on like I think he worked on, I think, the Subspecies movies, Puppet Master movies, stuff like that, stuff that you wouldn't think, but when you actually think about it, the effects are pretty decent.
The effects are pretty freaking outstanding.
So they're pretty.
The only goofy thing is the whole finger eyeball thing. I mean,
yeah. But
even that works. I mean, you gotta love it. There's almost seemingly a nod to, well, this is 90. So there's a callback to instead of a Farewell to Arms book lying on top of the hand in Evil Dead 2. It's the anatomical book being dropped on that little finger thing, squashing it like a fly or something, or. Yeah, and then that is comical. There is some, I mean, and yeah, some of the lines may be a little, but I mean, when Jeffrey Combs delivers that line, how dare you judge my work? I mean, there is a level of, like, he means it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
who are you to judge what I have done? And he
Yeah.
really does bring it to life. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, let's be
Well-
honest. Like, if you just let Jeffrey Combs chew the scenery, you're going to get a good movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is, he's going to bring something to it. But honestly, he has Herbert West down.
yes.
It was like the other day I was watching a video popped up about I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
forgot that Jeffrey Combs had a cameo in that. And I was thinking to myself, like, God, you have Jeffrey Combs in your movie and you do nothing with him. That is such a waste. Like, could you imagine
Yeah.
how much more infinitely entertaining I Still Know What You Did Last Summer would have been if they had just let Jeffrey Combs do his thing and, try to set him up as maybe like a red herring for the killer and stuff like that. It's like, think of how much more entertaining that movie would have been. You
What's
know?
what's the guy say? Nice dog. Not really.
Done in there, they should just taken out the white Jamaican guy and replaced him with Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah, to me, anytime you could take Jack Black out of a movie, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Take him out, just take the dreadlocks, put them on Jeffrey Combs. Pay to see that.
Well, I mean, there you go. I mean, Jeffrey Combs, I mean, he had quite a run. The one thing that he shared with Stuart Gordon is their time in theater on the stage, and it is quite amazing for Stuart Gordon to literally step off the stage of directing plays. I think in Chicago he was, and then he got a chance to bring Lovecraft to life, but really he brought what he did on the stage right onto in a theatrical presentation. I mean, his over the topness, the things he did. And Jeffrey Combs came out of the off stage too. And there's a real with Stuart Gordon's film, but I mean, Yuzna was producer on that film, and so I mean, we talked about that last show about the special effects artist who steps in, for the sequel. Here's the producer stepping in, but one who has an inherent love of horror cinema and just Lovecraft and everything. And although some of that came late, I think, in his life, maybe not horror per se, but Lovecraft came a little bit later for him. But I mean, really think about it. Like, if you were to like step back before, just as say Fango or Gorza, whoever first announced, hey, Yasna's going to step into the director's chair and direct the sequel to Rand. How many of us would have went, what?
Yeah.
And look what he did.
Yeah.
In some ways, this is my Re-animator movie. As great and over the top as the first one is, I love this freaking movie, man. I love freaking Dr. Hill with the whole bat wing and his head, and just the Peruvian Civil War, the opening battle sequence, and just and then just I think they tapped into and I want to pull that up here a little bit, but they tapped into specifically two of the 6 sections of the Lovecraft story, Re-animator. It's 6 sections in that story. And I went back this week and I actually reread that a few times. And because it's been a while since I read it. And
nice.
So what's your Lottie, start with you. What's your history with this movie or just with Re-animator in general?
Okay, before I start, I just want to take a minute to say, okay, all you horror fans out there, today is Valentine's Day. This is what we do. We talk about stuff like Bride of Re-animator. That's our idea of Valentine's Day movies.
And this is a perfect Valentine's Day movie, man. I mean,
so happy Valentine's Day, everybody. So,
you don't get any better than with her ripping her own heart out and and
yeah,
what you want.
How more do you show you love somebody when you pull out your own heart? What do you want? So yeah, this is what us horror fans do on Valentine's Day. We talk about Bride of Re-animator. Okay, the first time that I remember being young and I had gotten sick, and I know that I had to go to the doctor. We stopped at a video store on the way home, and they told me to keep me home for a couple of days. So I was at home, I was laying on the couch, my mom decided to rent some movies for us to watch, and Re-animator had just come out. Like we went to the video store, they had a copy of it there, and they had the poster and all that kind of stuff, and we just decided, like, what the heck, let's check it out, see what it's all about. And then, put it on, and I watched it, and I was just sucked into it. I was just like, this movie is awesome. Like, the effects are amazing. Like Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West. I mean, he just sucks you in. Like, anytime he's on screen, you are laser focused on him. You want to see everything he does. You want to see everything he says. Of course, Barbara, being a young boy getting into, puberty and stuff, Barbara Crampton really was not a bad way to start. The only thing is, I was like, it was like that old meme, where it's like, when you're watching the movie by yourself, all this other stuff coming on is happening. But it's like, of course, when it gets to the head gives head scene, that's when my mother happens to walk into the room, and she's like, what the fuck is this? Oh my God. Yes, she's like, because she wasn't watching the movie, she was doing other stuff. Is the rest of the movie like this? No, this is the first time anything like this is in there. And she's all like, okay, turn away and look. It's like, well, Mom, it's already over now, and all that stuff. And she's like, do you know what he was doing? It's like, I have a good idea, Mom. She's like, oh my God, the things I let my kids watch. But anyway, it's like, but no, I watched the movie and I loved it. And I was really genuinely sad because I thought at the end of the movie that Herbert West died. And it was like, I want to see more of this character. Yeah. So, and then years later, when we got the word that, it came out in Fangoria and stuff that, we're going to get a sequel, Bride of Re-animator, I was like, okay, well, all right. Okay, Brian Usna is directing instead of Stuart Gordon. Okay, Jeffrey Combs is coming back. I'm sold. That's all you need to give me. Jeffrey Combs is coming back. It's like, Bruce Abbott is coming back to play Dan. Okay, I like Bruce Abbott and stuff. All right, so okay, I'm down for this and everything. And then it came on late night cable. That was the first time I saw Bride of Re-animator, and I didn't think that I could be any more blown away than I was when I watched the first movie. The thing that just, the 80s was such a great time to watch horror movies because there was so much imagination going into all these movies. And it was just great to see, like, all these special effects artists just really putting their minds to work. I mean, like Rob Bottin and The Thing, and all the stuff that Tom Savini was doing. We were seeing what Rick Baker could do with American Werewolf in London and all this kind of stuff. And it was just like to watch, like, all these special effects creators, like what you were saying, like Wayne Toff, Screaming Mad George, KB, and on, and to see them all, you're sitting there like, did they come to Brian Usna and say, hey, we have an idea for this, that, or the other thing? Or did Brian Usna just gather all these people around and say, do what you want, go nuts, surprise me, let's do whatever we can do? It's like, either way, it doesn't matter, because and then just to see all the stuff that they did in that movie with the special, like, talking about like the little finger thing with the eyeball and all that stuff. And, the one thing I thought was funny, I'll get to that in a minute, but like when Herbert West, like, he's bored and he's got the leg on the table. So it's like, okay, so I'll take the arm and I'll connect the arm to the leg, put the fluid on it, and then it's like he's fighting with it and all that kind of stuff and everything else. And it's like, oh man, just like I said, just the imagination of it all. But I think the one thing that just kind of always made me laugh was like, I mean, I get the idea that Herbert West is supposed to be like this mad scientist. He's supposed to be a bit crazy, but you're sitting there kind of like, did Herbert West ever stop to think like, okay, here's the thing. Every time I use my reanimation fluid on something or somebody, it's like I always get the same result. They always come back. They're always out of control. And 10 times out of 10, I always wind up having to destroy it, or it destroys itself. It's like, maybe I should take some time to see if I could maybe like do something with the formula and stuff so that maybe this doesn't happen. But it's like that's kind of the funny part is that Herbert West, like he just keeps doing the same thing over and over and over again. He keeps expecting a different reaction, and it never happens. You know, even going into the third movie, it's like he just keeps doing it over and over again. And I just think that's funny. It's like obviously he's crazy, but you know, but just oh man, and just yeah, I love that one. And then then even when I watched Beyond Re-animator, that one was a lot of fun too. Especially the one part that always cracks me up is the drug addict who's like he can't get enough drugs into his system, so he gets a hold of the reanimation fluid, and he ends up turning himself inside out. And Herbert West comes, he sees the formula, and he looks in there. The guy's turned himself inside. He's like, "Hey man, give me some more of that shit." And Herbert West's like, "I think you've had enough." And he's like, "Don't you hold out on me, motherfucker." But I just always remember, I immediately fell in love with Re-animator and then Bride of Re-animator because like it was just so amazing. Like the 80s was such a great time for horror and science fiction movies just because like everybody was like always, especially with special effects, like how much more can we do? How much further can we push it? They did this in this movie. Let's see if we could take it a step farther and all that kind of stuff. And that's amazing. I wish we could get more movies like that nowadays where you could get, you get a director, even if they don't have the biggest budget in the world, it's like, I'm going to get like, special effects artists and we're going to kind of go old school and say, you know what, this is what the subject of the movie is. Surprise me. Use your imaginations. Try to come up with something innovative. Let's maybe see, maybe everything's already been done, but let's see, maybe we could kind of come up with something new, or at the very least, put a new spin on something. I wish we could get more stuff like that. The one thing I thought was funny though too is the Italian girl in Bride of Re-animator. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Sunday School.
Summer School.
Summer School, yeah, Summer School.
Anne Marie.
Yeah. I think it's funny that you have the girl from Summer School who is basically being drooled over by the two horror movie geeks and everything. Then you turn around, you put her in a real horror movie and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was kind of fun too, But so that's it for me. But just seeing on TV and seeing on video and just always loved it. And I had to make sure I had these. So.
What about you, Glenn?
For me, well, obviously it started with the first Re-animator. And the thing is, this is kind of weird because when I first saw Re-animator, I didn't like it. Maybe I think probably at the time I'd rented it probably expecting something else. Like I think I expected it like a more serious horror movie. And, kind of the comedy and elements of it were kind of bothered me at the time. But, so that was the first time I saw it, obviously. Then, a bit later, I rented it again. And I was like, I'm going to give this another shot. So I keep hearing about this. I'm going to watch it again. Second time, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And it's just, what can you say about a movie that ends with like a guy being pulled away by the intestines of an undead creature? It was just so awesome. Then I heard about Bride. Bride actually, it came out on VHS, and I had no real interest in it. I don't know why, but I just didn't have an interest. And then I saw a certain issue of Fangoria. And it was the one that had the bride there and showed like all her neck like flayed and everything. And like it was just such like a striking. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna rent this. So I rented it and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's gonna sound really funny to say it this way, but I find Bride has more heart than the first Re-animator. You know, and it kind of really does, literally. But, you know, my only gripe with it at the time was, you know, they didn't have what's her name? Barbara Crampton. That she wasn't back. Like I was hoping that, you know, it was gonna be like that she was gonna get resurrected, and like then like Herbert West was gonna make his own bride, and that was kind of the thing. That's what I was hoping at the time. Um, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, you know. And to this day, one of my favorite lines ever put on celluloid. Take a note, Dan. Tissue rejection. That line gets me every time. It's like all this horror is happening, and he's just like, take a note, tissue rejection. And the thing is, you know full well that Herbert West is thinking, oh, okay. Well, next time I'll have to do this. And also, I gotta say, the finger eyeball thing, it was cute. Yeah. You know, it was cute.
You know, it almost kind of reminded me a little bit of the stop motion stuff that was used in that you always forget about, but was in the original Piranha when you got to see those little creatures. Yeah, it reminded me of that a little bit.
Yeah, I loved that little thing, and then I just love the fact also that Herbert West is making these like creatures, and then, you know, he's like, well, it's too much work to get rid of them. I'll just chuck them in this hole, which is in a crypt next door. It's like just throwing them in there. It's like,
which, if you remember, we get the little nod to Rats in the Walls.
Oh yeah,
which is a nice little nod to another story from H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, I can't help it. One thing I can't help it makes me laugh. It's like after, you know, he reanimates the inspector, and the inspector kills the girl's dog and all this stuff. And Herbert, you know, Dr. West, he's looking at it, he's all like, graft the arm of a person onto a dog. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And then she comes down, she sees the dog and everything, and then the dog tries shaking her hand. It's just like, it's at the, you know, it's like, it's so crazy, but it's so much fun to watch. It's just, Herbert West is just like, oh shit, I'll reanimate anything. Doesn't matter what it is anymore. It's like, you know.
The thing is, he has no internal, like, you know how most people have that thing in their brain where they're going to say something and then they think, you know what, I probably shouldn't say that. He has that, but he doesn't have that for doing things. You know, it's like here's an arm, here's a leg. Oh, I could stitch those together. Let's do it. You know, as opposed to like most normal people be like, oh look, there's an arm, there's a leg. I better throw those out. No, he's like, I could stitch those together. You know, I could take these two people, like cut them in half lengthways and stick them the wrong way together. It's like he has no impulse control. There we go. Herbert West ADHD.
Yeah.
But I love
as much as I love the acting, you know, the acting is so much fun to watch. I told you guys this right before we started recording, but like, I just love that some of the acting is so hammy in this movie. It's so over the top, but it's fun to watch. Like, you know, I was telling you guys about the inspector coming in, and, you know, I was like, do you believe that dead is dead, Dr. West? He's like, you butcher, and all this stuff. And, you know, he's like, you know, your wife died of multiple contusions. She fell. Ha! She fell, did she? It's like, it's so hammy, but at the same time, it's just so much fun.
It's hammy, but underneath the surface, that is kind of a scary thought, to think that this guy actually might have beat his wife to death.
Yeah.
And he is being basically accused of killing his own wife, when he is trying to throw the blame on on someone else, and it was kind of, because it kind of flies in the face of who this guy seems to be, you know, in terms of how we're getting to know this guy. But you know, what is it? Herbert says to Dan, you know, he's a wife beater. Get the gun.
Yeah. Oh,
But you know, I was listening to an interview with Jeffrey Combs. I think it was on. I don't know why this stuff always happens to me.
happens every time.
Yeah.
Okay, there's three sources. If you want to dig deeper with Jeffrey Combs or John or Stuart Gordon, you've got Mick Garris's archive and his post-mortem that you can find on Spotify or YouTube. Probably you can. You got the movie crypt that's hosted in part by Adam Green. They interviewed Jeffrey Combs, and then you've got Eli Ross, History of Horror on Spotify, the audio versions of those or expanded interviews. And Jeffrey, I think, well, I don't know if Jeffrey Combs is in there. Stuart Gordon is for sure. But you listen like to Jeffrey Combs, and I think he mentioned at one point where call it hamminess or whatever. But I'm pretty sure he said there were points where him and Bruce sort of got together and were like, you know, we know he's trying. We know this is supposed to be a really serious film at heart, but we got to remind the audience that we're sort of here with them, and you know, and so we're sort of dealing. We're all dealing with the same thing, and so you know, kind of lighten it a little bit, you know, just kind of make it a little more fun in light of it, you know, and probably. I mean, no, I think both Stewart and Usna both are trying, in spite of the hamminess or the over the topness, they're both trying to create a pretty serious view of Lovecraft, which for my own part, and I guess I'm sort of a kind of a well, pun intended, I guess, a stitch. Yeah, like both of you in a way. I think I remember renting Re-animator on VHS. See, I would have been 15 or probably 16 when it showed up in the video store. And yeah, I think I was a huge fan of Evil Dead 2. Loved Evil Dead 2. And I love that sort of comedy. I love that sort of over the topness. But there was something about Re-animator that I think, like you, Glenn, at first I wasn't sure. I got captivated by like some of the stills in Fangoria where the intestine where it was, you know, had flowed out and all, and that moment at the end. But I think I kind of walked away. I think I remember not being that high for whatever reason on it at the time as well. And unfortunately, I missed Bride because that came out in 90 and I was just going into the Army in 90. So there was a stretch about 4 years, 4 or 5, almost 6 years really before. And that's not to say I completely shut myself off of horror, but because of the Army, the inability of me to really be in as I was as a kid, I wasn't. I mean, I was still grabbing my fangos if I could. I was still trying, but more of an outsider, I guess. Trying to keep up a little bit of what was happening, even in those first few years of the early 90s. And then eventually, you know, I started to come back into horror really strong. But Re-animator was something that that I didn't revisit, but eventually I fell into Lovecraft, and I started just consuming, you know, his stories, and then somewhere, probably because of Body Bags, I would imagine, somewhere along the way, Re-animator popped up, and immediately, because of my love of Lovecraft and source material. Immediately I was sort of like, I don't know. that's not really Re-animator. That's something else. That's not Re-animator. That's not the Lovecraft story. That's, it's World War One. It's more of a period piece, and it's more, And then I don't know. I saw on Amazon one day, about the same time as I was picking up the Anchor Bay Day of the Dead, I picked up Re-animator. I figured, I just pick it up and check it out. And I don't know, I started to see it in a different way.
Mhm.
I started to see it more. And I think what helped actually was what I was a fan of in the 80s was, or having rented it on VHS, was Dagon.
Mhm.
I was a huge fan of Dagon. But I wasn't understanding the implications of, well, what is this? This is, Shadow over Innsmouth, and this is Dagon, and it's sort of, these two stories compressed into a film by, Stuart Gordon. I mean, I didn't understand all this stuff. I rented it and I saw it and I'm like, dang, this is a creepy movie. This is freaking weird. And, so, I mean, I was a huge fan of that. And then knowing Stuart Gordon eventually, you're right. I had to revisit Re-animator. And then, so I slowly started to come around a
Mhm.
little bit. And then one day, last year and a half or whatever, I was in one of my places and, and I saw Bride, and, you don't see arrows pop up all the time in there. And I don't know, I think he was selling this for, $29.98, $30. But, I popped it open, I looked at it, 2 discs, the book, everything's in there. I'm going to go and get it. And I rushed home and I actually watched it that night and I fell in love with this movie. I mean, this movie absolutely just blew my mind away. Just the aesthetics of it. I think that a lot of dark colors in this. I wonder what this would look like on 4K.
Yeah.
If they if they had a good negative to work with. But I mean, Bride, I mean, immediately I was like, okay, I see Lovecraft in here more than I remember ever seeing it in the first film.
Mhm.
There is definitely, this is my love. This is my Re-animator right here. But then that led me into a much more serious revisiting of Re-animator, the first film. And now at this point, I've really, I think I've come to fully accept Stewart's, initial vision and using us, especially his continuation. Now, I still haven't seen, and if I have, I completely forgot. I don't have any recollection of actually seeing Beyond, so I don't know what that's like in comparison to, these two films. But so I don't know. I've come around a lot on these, and this has taken me and it kind of goes back a little bit, Lonnie, I think, to why I have a hard time with the what's the thing that sort of spoofs the movies that you're always talking
Riff
about,
tracks.
huh?
Riff tracks. Yeah.
Yeah, the riff tracks. I'm too seriously wired for my own good. And so I mean, I appreciated your one video that you did recently, when you were talking about that. And I actually when I got home, having listened to that, I immediately went and double checked my Devilfish, and I don't have the riff tracks on there, for whatever reason. It's kind of because I was gonna try to revisit that, but so I don't know. I mean, Lovecraft, I still love the written word. I love the source material. I love the story. And there's a lot in there that has not been tapped into. I mean, we could easily, even if someone just wanted to sort of revisit from a fresh perspective on new Re-animator, film, but maybe leap off of another section of one of the sections, because this came out. This was written in 1922 in 6 segments for home brew. So it wasn't even anything big like Weird Tales or anything. It was this other publication, and it was a publication just to make him some money real quick. And if I remember, Lovecraft wasn't even that high on this own story. which is amazing because it makes you wonder what he would think if he could sit in a theater and watch
Yeah.
Re-animator. I wonder if it would give him a real chuckle. I wonder if he would, see some of the things in there from his own story that maybe even we're missing,
Maybe.
no matter how many times we reread or read, the stories or whatever. But I don't know. But I did come across something. I think it might interest you guys a little bit in the section in Re-animator. There's a short little where is it? Right here. There's a short little piece. See, okay, so it comes from the Horror from the Shadows, which is the segment from World War One.
Mhm.
And then the last section, which the Tomb Legions, which a lot of it is connected with the cemetery and all that crazy stuff that ends up happening in the end. But there's this one paragraph, and I thought this is seriously, this is freaking Herbert West, man. There's this paragraph, and it sort of goes, of his methods in the intervening 5 years, I dare not speak. Of course, we know Bruce Abbott is the narrator, and he's more closely tied. I mean, he is his assistant in the original story.
Mm.
And the thing that keeps him disconnected from West in the movies is his his failed relationships with women. Because they always end up failing somehow, some way. But he says, Lovecraft says, I was held. This is the narrator, or Bruce Abbott, if you want. I was held to him by sheer force of fear and witnessed sights that no human tongue could repeat. Gradually, I came to find Herbert West himself more horrible than anything he did. That was when it dawned on me that his once normal scientific zeal for prolonging life has subtly degenerated into a mere morbid and ghoulish curiosity and a secret sense of carnal picturesqueness. His interest became a hellish and perverse addiction to the repellently and fiendishly abnormal. He gloated calmly over artificial monstrosities which would make most healthy men drop dead from fright and disgust. He became, behind his pallid intellectuality, a fastidious Baudelaire, that's how you say his name, right, of a physical experiment, a languid elagabalus of the tombs. Now, interesting, when you look up this guy, I didn't realize it was a guy's name, Baudelaire. He was a French poet. But his name carries a little meaning to it, and it is well, if you take it in its meaning, what it ends up being is a spiritless god of the mountain of the tombs.
Mm.
And this guy Baudelaire, as a French poet, one of his main nemesis, who was always on the attack on him in his work, said, and think if this isn't Herbert West, everything, this French poet's work, everything in it which is not hideous is incomprehensible. Everything one understands is putrid.
Mm.
That's Herbert West.
It really kind of is, yeah.
And it's in this word elagabalus is just a without life, an absolute without, I think is what, or spiritless, without life, spiritless. And so I did a little bit more reading on this French poet. This guy is from the mid 1500s, and he was a contemporary, or pretty close there, with Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh,
which makes sense because Lovecraft, he looked up to Poe. Poe was his main guy, and I'm sure Lovecraft would have been, well, he had to have been well aware of this poet because he uses his name in order to add depth to Herbert West's character. And I found one short poem that this guy wrote from circa around 1857. This guy was not liked. This guy was not liked at all. And partly, well, this is the kind of stuff he wrote. There's a poem he wrote called Magnetic Horror. And now remember, this is mid 1800s. Beneath the sky so livid and strange, tormented like thy destiny, what thoughts within thy spirit range themselves, O libertine, reply, with vain desires forever torn towards the uncertain and the vast, and yes, like Ovid, I'll not mourn, who from his Roman heaven was cast. O heavens, turbulent as the streams, in you I mirror forth my pride. Your clouds which clad in morning glide, and I love this ending, are the hearses of my dreams, and in your illusion lies the hell wherein my heart delights to dwell. If that's not Herbert West,
Yeah.
This guy is, and it's funny because you have to dig for it. But when you do, you find this mad scientist creature he is a god of the mountain of tombs. And in a way, Jeffrey Combs brings that to life.
Yeah. He does.
In his own way. He is not to be messed with. I mean, even in the Peruvian scene, two points that are interesting in that, in terms of the source material. One, he doesn't have any problem just shooting people.
Yeah.
And second, it does mention somewhere in that section, it does mention that even in the midst of all of the horror that, because he loved just the idea of just having an endless number of dead bodies and body parts and everything else that he could get his hands on. He does, it's mentioned by the narrator that he does do good with the soldiers, though. He does save soldiers. Maybe out of convenience or just to keep his position intact, keep people away from him or out, but he when that scene when he looks down at Bruce Abbott and he's like, you're gonna be all right, buddy. I mean, there's a genuine quality. Now maybe it's just the need to have him along as an assistant as much as he can, because you can't find an assistant like that anywhere.
No, you can't.
And and so it is interesting how the bride ends up being the mechanism that really does draw these two together. And there's that incredible scene when she, being brought to life, is embracing Bruce Abbott, and she won't accept. Talk about tissue rejection. She rejects her maker because the heart that beats inside of her is Meg's. But even what was her character's name? Gloria, the girl in the hospital bed. She also has an affection for him.
Yep.
And both Meg and her really there are conflicted. And so it's almost like in the end, it's not even so much his what's her name in there, Francesca. It's not even I don't know if it's her jealousy over Francesca as much as Gloria's jealousy over Meg.
Yeah.
When he says, I don't want your body. And that's when we get that great moment, when she just lunges or pulls her heart on and like, is this what you want? Meaning, is Meg what you want? Is that who you want? You don't want me? And so it's almost kind of like Francesca is sort of an outsider. She's almost like an outsider to this, even though the two go at it. And, you know, you get that
Yeah.
wonderful scene where, you know, West is like, my girl is superior to your girl. Your girl doesn't stand a chance. It does that whole scene as it unfolds is so great. It's just, and there's so much going on than what may appear to be going on. That
Mhm.
and it's like I think you said, I think it was Glenn, you said it's where the heart comes from.
Yeah.
Pun intended, really. I mean, there's a lot of heart in this. There's a lot going on, a lot being thought about, and it's not, you know, and the whole character of Gloria is, and Bruce Abbott's relationship, Dan's relationship to her.
Mhm.
He so desperately wants to save her, wants to see her, you know, resurrected in the right way, that he wants to heal her, right?
Yep.
Restore her life. And maybe there's a relationship with her, you know, if he can, you know, somehow, you know, and yeah, there's so much. I mean, and you know, and just uh we mentioned that the, you know, the cop who, you know, the Arkham police guy who's, you know, whose wife is in the sanitarium all messed up. And I don't remember, is she like, do we know of her in the first movie? Is it like, because she's talked about as she's part of the Miskatonic massacre in the sense that somehow she gets the serum and she's brought back to life, but is she in the movie, is she
I
like,
don't recall anything about her from the first movie or anything.
yeah,
Nothing rings a bell. No.
because I'm trying to remember that whole scene that takes place of how many people are actually involved in that. I know there's a lot of chaos and a lot of crazy stuff going on in the end, and
Unless maybe like, you know, because, you know, in the first movie, you know, Dr. Hill goes into the morgue and he starts injecting all the different bodies with it. Maybe she was one of the bodies. That's about the only thing I could maybe think of.
yeah,
Because we don't see, you know, like an older woman get killed or anything like that, or any of that kind of stuff. That would be the only thing I could think of. It's just when Hill, you know, resurrected all those dead bodies, maybe she was one of them. That's about the best thing I could think of.
yeah.
Yeah.
That is interesting. It's almost kind of like, in a way, Exorcist 3, how you kind of get these characters who are now in the absolute forefront of things, but are mentioned in the first film, who are in the background of things, are now brought forth, you know, and you know, what Dr. Graves' character, what a loon he is, man.
Yeah.
He's like that guy. He's like that I want to be Wes, but I'll never be like Wes because I just don't have the smarts for it or something.
You would think
He's
the
a bit
minute
of
that
a,
he resurrects Dr. Hill's head, you would think like the minute he resurrects Dr. Hill's head, as soon as Hill insults him, be like, okay, fuck this guy. I'm putting him back down again.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, dude, I'm not gonna sit here and let this, you know, goddamn head sit here and call me all these names and try to boss me around. Fuck him. Okay, you know what? Maybe you were dead for a reason, prick. I'm putting you back down. You know, you would think. You know.
yeah. Yeah, well, I love how he just wraps up his head and throws it in the trash.
Yeah.
And he's genuinely a little bit terrified when he shows back there. Of course, he's got the Arkham cop as his stooge now. And that is kind of weird. That scene is weird. Okay, so I rewatched this the other night with my wife. This movie runs, what, an hour and 36. I don't know if I've ever in an hour and 36 heard this phrase as much as I've heard then. And it was, oh, that is so wrong. Oh, that is so wrong. And I'm thinking to myself, and I never said it, but I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'm so glad we're not watching the first movie. I'm so glad we're not watching, especially for that one scene. I'm so glad we're not watching the first one. But that was absolutely, but I think by the end of it, she was sensing that there was other things deeper going on that made it an intriguing intriguing film, and you got to love it though, how he's, just how everything in the end sort of kind of springs on him, and it almost sort of reminds you the climax in a way, kind of weird way, climax of Maniac.
Yeah.
How, all his phantoms come form in the end. And to him though, they're real, they're alive, they're breathing, but for us, they're sort of almost Lovecraftian phantoms that are just, coming for him to take him away. Yeah. So I don't know what else. I mean, there's actually a lot of stuff in this thing.
There is. It's a much, how can I put it? It's a much deeper movie than you think. Your first thought is automatically like, okay, Bride of Re-animator. It's like Bride of Frankenstein. And it does have that element to it, but there's a lot more in there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I read, I got this book, Lovecraft in Transition. It's a collected works, essays from Joshi, S.T. Joshi, which you guys have the Vestron release of Dagon?
No, I never.
He's got I think it's the only Lovecraft film that I think he's got an interview on, which is pretty decent, although it's kind of for Dagon, but he does speak a little bit to the other. There's an interesting little thing in here in this essay he wrote called on reality and knowledge, from Lovecraft's perspective and where he kind of stood on these things. But in terms of pride, he talks about this ancient Greek idea of hubris, and overweening pride was a strong one in Lovecraft. But while the Greeks applied it to a man's belief that he was the equal or superior of the gods, who would then castigate him for such notion, Lovecraft seemed to apply it to a human being's notion that he could subvert or control natural law, and who in many cases came very close to doing it. Lovecraft seemed to take a rich satisfaction in condemning such figures in his fiction to utter annihilation. And so that's why I don't mind the fact that in Re-animator, and really in effect Re-animator to the Bride, Herbert West in effect really is taken care of at the end.
Yeah, that's true.
And yet, like his own work, he's resurrected.
Yeah.
Which really sort of goes along with, there are 6 individual pieces of this work that was submitted to a pulp magazine. And so I don't have any problem at all how Re-animator ends, and then we have Bride, because it's just like another story. And you could do this again. The Plague Demon is awesome because it's Arkham is ravaged by a typhoid plague, and in the midst of that plague, West and Dan are at it, and they unleash this monster who ends up killing like 14 people, just going into houses and just ravaging people in the midst of this plague. And I thought, wow, there's a movie there too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That would be the thing I think would be interesting. Like, if you were ever going to do a remake of Re-animator, I think that would be an interesting idea. Like, do faithful adaptations of the stories. Do them as period pieces and stuff like that, and do it the way Lovecraft wrote it. And then, but the best part is though too is like what from Rob was just reading a few minutes ago about talking about the horrors that he had seen because of Herbert West and everything else. Again, you could get practical special effects artists, and you could say to them, hey man, take these lines that from this passage and use your imagination. Come up with some great stuff. Let's see if we could do something people had never seen before. But let's, that could be a thing. Like if they ever wanted to do a remake of it, that would be, in my opinion, that would be the best way to approach it. Let's faithfully adapt Lovecraft's work. We can, get Robert Eggers to do it. Like get him to do it. He could definitely do that great old fashioned horror movie feel and everything else. Like get somebody like him to do it. But do the adaptations of the stories. Because like what Rob just said about they created this monster that went and killed all these people and stuff like that, and and West and Dan have to deal with it and stuff. I mean, that would be interesting. You could sit there and make a series of, if the first one was successful, you can make a series of movies out of that if you wanted to,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and
you could do that, or you could just keep Stuart Gordon's Usna spirit alive, and just say, look at the plague demon, and say, let's use that as our home base, and we'll be an Arkham based movie during a terrible plague. And now with COVID and everything else, this stuff's still fresh in our minds.
Yeah.
And in the midst of, and you could even take an element from the horror from the shadows, which, at least in the, in the book takes place in World War I. But the element of that is lost in the in Peru is just this over abundance of, in the story you get this idea that the bodies never ended. They were just getting bodies and bodies and bodies, and you don't really get that sense in the Peruvian scene, but you would get that sense in the plague demon because of the typhoid breakout or whatever you wanted to use as your plague. You could just have that sense of where these two are trying to be the good doctors of Arkham Miskatonic Hospital. They're trying to be the good doctors and help, but we've got the side work of let's use this reanimating fluid as much as we can. Maybe we can restore these people to life or whatever. And then, of course, you create this monster who's out there just almost in a Dunwich Horror type way, just out there running havoc.
Yeah.
And, that is a great story. I mean, that there's a great movie there, that you could, and that's the beauty of six different pieces to this. There's other places that you can go back into and bring to life, whether you treat it as a period piece or you just kind of treat it as another, sequel in maintaining the aesthetics that Gordon and Usna gave us.
One thing. No, sorry, I was just gonna say, one thing though that I didn't even think about until you mentioned it, Rob, about how the stories always end with West dying, but then he just reappears in the next one. One thing that is interesting, sorry, I'm going to give you a tiny little spoiler alert about Beyond Re-animator. I personally think that Usna planned for more sequels, because at the end of Beyond Re-animator, actually Herbert West doesn't die. He kind of, because in that one, the whole movie takes place inside this Spanish prison, and West is in there, and he's kind of like the prison doctor, and he's doing his experiments with the prisoners and stuff like this. But at the end of the movie, instead of him dying, he basically just kind of like all hell's breaking loose in this prison. West just kind of slips out and just kind of moves on. So it's kind of different in that sense. That, he doesn't die at the end of the third one. He just kind of. So I really do. I think Usna did have an idea that he wanted to continue doing Re-animator movies. I mean, he wouldn't have had like West, just slip out and it's like, okay, well, where's Herbert West going to turn up next? So.
Wonder why it took so long to get that one out, because you go from 85 to 90, and then suddenly it's a jump to 03, I think, right? Beyond is 03.
Something like that.
I wonder what the why there was such
sure.
a big jump. And the only one back for that one is Jeffrey Combs, right?
Well, Usna came back and directed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no Bruce Abbott in this one.
Yeah.
No, in this one he gets another. Turns out it's kind of like one of those, like movies where you got the mad scientist, like we've seen in like Frankenstein movies and stuff like that, where the young, wannabe scientist comes up as, I know that you're Frankenstein and all this, and I don't want to report you. I want to help you. I want to assist you and stuff. It's kind of the same thing in Beyond Re-animator. This young wannabe scientist finds Herbert West and just, is like, hey, I want you to teach me, and I want to be your pupil, and, I want to learn from you, that kind of a thing. So.
Talk about funny lines. What about when he says, when the Arkham cop is gone run just havoc in the house, and Jeffrey or Herbert West runs out the one side, and then when he comes in the front door, and she, of course, Francesca's freaking out, like, what are you doing? You've done this. And he's like, he just looks at him, he's like, man, she's a hysterical.
She leaves the house and everything. He's like, wow, better off without her.
Yeah. And that is kind of a quiet nod to the stories too, though, because the stories, Dan he doesn't have that problem.
Mm-hmm.
He is fully connected as our narrator, but he's fully connected as his assistant to his hip. And even though he doesn't want to go to World War I, Herbert West, and he follows with him, and they go up to Canada so they can go over before the United States is ever in the conflict. They go out there, and so they're out there, kind of, taking, as much use as they can of that. I'm trying to think. So you got the Peruvian opening, you got Gloria, you've got him moving back into Dan's house. Of course, they're connected to the cemetery. You got him just doing all the weird stuff. And then, of course, maybe the great piece to the whole thing is just the so did you guys take note of what made up all the pieces of the reanimated bride?
Some of it, yeah.
Yeah.
With like the foot of a ballerina.
Yeah, I wrote it all down.
Of a virgin.
I wrote it all down on a nice little diagram. I made my own Herbert West diagram. So you got, the feet of a ballet dancer who cut her own feet off. She committed suicide, or maybe they take her feet from her. She committed suicide. The legs of a hooker, which is why, she kind of rubs her leg up, on Dan at the, which is kind of weird, but you understand it because it's a leg of a hooker, and that's what she would have remembered. A virgin's womb, of course, Meg's heart, the arms of a waitress. The hands were different though. One hand belongs to a lawyer who, I gotta love when he says, "Case dismissed." And then he runs around the table to the other, and then he's really smitten by this hand, who he suggests is the hand of a murderess.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the head of Gloria, and the heart of Meg. So a ballet dancer, a hooker, a virgin, arms of a waitress, a lawyer's hand, a murderess's hand, and Gloria's head. And this is your bride. And how great are the effects of that?
Oh,
amazing. I will say though that it's kind of weird though, because the way they piece the body together, you can't help but sit there and think to yourself like, okay, once you put this woman together, where do you go from there? Like, how do you expect this thing to walk around out in public? Like, what were you gonna do? Just keep it in the house all the time, or like, what was your plan for it after that?
Herbert didn't think that far ahead.
Oh no, of course not.
Just I want to do this. Like, what happens afterwards? I don't know.
But you're sitting there, because I remember when I was watching it again the other day, it's like I was thinking to myself, it's like, it's like you could, it's like you two guys are experienced scientists and all this kind of stuff. you think you guys could figure out a better way to like put the body parts together to at least make it look something like an actual person, you know,
Yeah.
and all that. You think at least Dan would have said, be like, yeah, don't you think maybe we should try to figure out a better way to piece this together? Because, you know, it's like, I mean, it's not like we're gonna be able to take her out and show her around town or anything like that. You know, it's like, you know,
I think what you would have had she had she lived, the bride. I think she's the one that would have whispered in Dan's ear, "We don't need West anymore.
oh yeah,
We don't need him anymore. It's me and you. Me and you can do this." That's
Mhm.
and that, of course, you gotta love the. I wish we would have got more of the flying hill head.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was
That was
freaking
fun.
great. That could have been really cheesy, but it works.
It does.
It works. It works. And I wish we only got a little bit of it. And that the massacre in the hospital too was kind of, I mean, you only get the aftermath, but you kind of get a
Yeah.
sense of what they did to get out of there. And then I thought it was a little creepy that Chapham, Lieutenant Chapham, that the first place he goes to on his resurrection is to the graveyard.
Yeah.
He's just gonna like be a ghoul hanging out in the graveyard until he's summoned by Dr. Hill.
Doctor.
And yeah, I wanted to revisit because of Hill more than anything. I wanted to revisit the first Re-animator, the movie. I didn't get a chance to this week or the last week or whatever. I didn't get a chance to. But how long into that? How long do you basically go into that movie before he meets his demise?
Probably about 30 to 40 minutes in, something like that. He's in there a good bit of the movie before he gets killed. So almost about halfway, I would say.
And West takes his head, right? Takes his head off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then he brings him back. Well, let's say more like 45 minutes to an hour, I would say.
I
Yeah,
can't
the West
remember.
takes his head off, then he reanimates him, and then Bill
How does
goes
Meg,
and does
how does
his thing.
Meg die in there? I can't remember. How does Meg die?
She got strangled.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the corpses grabs her and strangles her to death. Dan was able to save her in time. So
it makes you wonder, like, how she ended up just as the heart. I mean, we've seen the cut scenes, so we know what happened. But
what happened?
well, like he reanimates her with the stuff, and then it goes well at the beginning, but then like she like kind of explodes almost.
Oh,
Like she like spins around and her head like goes like and everything. Yeah, it's on the blue. It's on like the deleted scenes.
huh. I'll have to
It's
check that
definitely
out.
watching.
Interesting.
one thing I thought was funny though is like in Bride of Reanimators, like I always get a chuckle out of the line is like when because talking about Dan living in the house by the cemetery, no Fulci pun intended or anything like that, but when Francesca comes over to cook him dinner and all this, and he's like, "Did you have any trouble finding the place?" And she's like, "No, it was pretty easy to find with the cemetery." That I don't know why that line always got a chuckle out of me. One thing that did surprise me though was I remember the very first time when I watched it, it didn't go this way, but I thought at some point, I remember the first time when I was watching, I was actually kind of nervous about Francesca because I thought at some point either something was going to happen to her or Wes was going to be like, you know what? There's something of her that we can use. So let's kill Francesca and take something from her and put it into the bride. So I remember feeling that. I remember feeling a little bit of dread for the Francesca character. Of course, it didn't turn out that way, but
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting.
Well, with Dan's luck with women, she'd probably end up dead anyways.
Yeah.
It's just almost like a given.
So I wonder how much of the bride's demise is her inability to actually have this life and not being able to realizing she's not going to have Dan. She just begins to fall apart. Or is it simply tissue rejection?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I'd say more. I mean, I love the idea of tissue rejection, but look at all the other reanimated things. None of them are suffering from tissue rejection.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if it's more.
I think it's something to do with ripping out the heart.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think there was like almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like almost like an internal rejection, not a physiological one, but more like a psychological rejection of these other parts.
Yeah.
And it just kind of,
you know would have been great.
What?
And you wouldn't have caught it, but it would have been beautiful when you would have thought of it after the fact. If with one hand, with the murderess's hand, she grabs Francesca and, throws her off. But when, West makes his proclamation of, I made her, she turns with an accusing hand, using her lawyer's hand to point at him.
Yeah.
That would have been pretty, but that would have been something you would have thought of and talked about after the fact, like, how cool is that? That was, and that kind of interesting how her body parts were sort of in conflict with one another. Seemingly, at least her heart and her head. And and you did catch too, right? When she's standing there, the camera goes down and you notice that she is up on her toes like a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
That's that. Yeah, there's a lot of neat little, nice
little touches.
Yeah. It's. Yeah, I noticed Beyond is pretty cheap on DVD. I might try to snag that while it's still apt to. Can't remember who.
DVD has a certain special feature. It's a music video, and my God, I haven't seen anything as gay in my life. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that's a bad thing or whatever. I'm just saying it is the gayest video
on the Beyond.
On Beyond Re-animator, yeah.
Because it's funny you point that out, Glenn, because in the book that comes in our Arrow, the write-up in there, the writer does point to what he suggests is a what seems to be an apparent or possibility of a homosexual relationship between West and Dan. I don't see it at all. I don't see it in the book, in the source material. I don't see it in the movies. I don't see it at all. I think that was forced. I think that was a forced opinion to just kind of throw out there, because I don't see it in there at all. I don't.
Well, let's be honest. I mean,
I watched it closely too. I mean, I watched. Anytime Wes happened to glance at him, look at him, his demeanor is in. I guess I can see how somebody can pull that out, but I mean,
I think you're projecting
you are, because even in the end of it, Dan's heart is conflicted between two, well, really between three women.
Yeah.
Meg, Gloria, and Francesca.
Dan's as straight as they come.
Yeah, and if anything, he's been duped by the bride. because
Yeah.
he looks at Francesca, he gives her that one look for a moment. It almost implies, I think I'm kind of happy here.
Yeah.
Now that's short lived, but there's a glimpse, a moment where he's like seriously considering, like, I can have Meg again. I can have Gloria. I can have my, I don't know what that looks like, in its, but I can almost have my cake and eat it too, kind of.
Yeah.
That thankfully that's sort of short lived, at the end, and him and Francesca are able to, climb up out of the graveyard, and
I think, I don't think that there's any kind of like, I mean, if people want to read into it, they're going to, but I think, just from my interpretation of it, it seems like the reason why West is so, you know, he wants to stay with Dan is because he can manipulate him.
well, yeah,
He can like West knows that it's like, look, all I gotta do is just say a few words, a little double talk. I can keep getting Dan back on board with what I'm doing. I can get him to get what I need him to get, or I can get him to do this for me or do that for me. And the whole thing is complete manipulation.
yeah.
He's building the bride using the heart of this one woman that Dan loved and the head of this other woman that Dan cared strongly about. He knows that if he does this, he's going to keep Dan in. That's what's keeping Dan invested.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. So I never interpret it as any kind of like gay romance or.
No, in fact, I think Herbert West, at least in the films, if anything, you could suggest any sexual pleasure that he enjoys comes from the satisfaction in seeing things come to life that he has created.
Yeah.
And that is his morbidness. That is his, but there's nothing like that at all in the story as far as I read the story. I mean, in there, he is a diabolical evil monster. I mean, he is the worst form of a mad scientist.
Let's be honest, when we talk about Lovecraft, I mean, he's very almost like asexual to begin with.
Yeah.
Never really plays into any of his stories or anything, and we know that him as a person, yeah, he was married for a while.
Right.
And apparently he was a satisfactory lover, according to his wife. And but I just don't think it wasn't a big deal.
But when things didn't go, when things weren't going the way he wanted, because I think eventually she went off to California for something. He was in New York, and he just did not like city life at all. He longed for home, and so he was willing to just, for Lovecraft, it was her or home, and it was home.
Yeah.
Even if it means not having a relationship with her, I'll be home. I'll be home. I want home. I want Providence. That's what made him happy, was Providence. And so there is probably a bit of that into the story. And as far as him, and again, it's probably not a lot written into Herbert West, just because he wasn't even apparently not that fond of the actual story itself. But still, I mean, I'm sure if anything, it's him projecting himself into West. West is an interesting creature, but he's one not to be messed with.
Yeah.
Because he does not. He has one singular objective, and if it means you are between him and that singular objective, he will take you out in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Because you have something useful. There's something useful you can give. It's one of your body parts, but there's something useful. Which is great. It's just such a, So I've really come around a lot. I don't know what I think about Beyond when I get a chance to finally see it, but
it'll be interesting to hear, especially I want to say, like, is it an after credit scene with the rat? That's all I'm gonna say.
I think so. Yeah.
Where the rat is having a nice little fight with something. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, any last little thoughts on this?
I'm pretty good.
No, just no. Love Bride of Re-animator. Always did. Always will.
Yeah.
I do not to long it out or anything, but I do love it. Like there's a few times, I think only 2 or 3 times maybe, when you get something like when he was it when Wes says police would never come here, and then immediately the doorbell rings and it was gonna shout him. And that
That's what I
happens.
say. It's like a lot of those funny lines. You get some good funny lines in that movie. Was it hard to find? Did you have trouble finding the house? No, just I knew where it was, right by the cemetery.
Oh, there was another too, where maybe it's someone delivers the line, who would steal body parts? And then the very next frame shows Wes coming around a corner, peeking around
Yeah.
into the. It's like, God, you gotta love those little moments. That,
Yeah.
Definitely.
but
Well, see, that's like another thing though too. Is like when we've been discussing this movie, it's just like that's the thing. I think for a lot of people, if they've never seen it before, their first viewing, they're not going to catch a lot of that stuff. I would say like with and like from what both of you guys have told me, I think that's kind of the thing, and I think that needs to be said for all three Re-animator movies. I think they're movies that you need to watch them more than once. All three of them. That goes for Beyond as well, because I think there might just be something about those movies that just kind of have like a disconnect or something like a lot of people just don't pick up on it the first time. And I think, just all three of those movies. So like that would be my advice to anybody. Like if you've never seen any of the Re-animator movies, but you're interested in watching them, I would recommend, you know what, give it at least a couple of tries, each movie a couple of tries, because just like that seems to be the thing. Just a lot of people didn't pick up on it the first time, but the second time they watch it, they appreciate it a lot more. So, and that's the thing, Rob. You said you haven't even seen Beyond Re-animator yet, so I would suggest that too. I'd say, you know what? If you watch it, you may not care for it the first time you watch it, but maybe give it a little bit of time, kind of sit on it, then maybe watch it a second time. I'm pretty sure you'll probably enjoy it a lot more. So.
And I guess I'll just say too, if you've been watching us all this time, listening and everything, and maybe if you're just a fan of the movies or some of the Lovecraft inspired movies, and not really gotten that deep into his actual, and there's a lot. I mean, Lovecraft is everywhere now, but I've got this is just one volume I have in Necronomicon, which has all of his main stories. But then I also have the other volume, which has his lesser known stories, but they're same publisher. But I mean, you can't go wrong with just, and then if you really want to go deep into understanding who this guy even was, anything Joshua would have wrote, but this Lovecraft in translation is a great work. And two, he wrote a lot of poetry too. I got a Joshua edited book with the collection of all his poetry. I think it's called The Ancient Track. Hippocampus Press put out a lot of the good stuff. Joshua's work. Plus, if you had Vestron's release of Dagon, you got Joshua on there in an interview, which is really cool.
Nice.
And, that's nice. And that's why I went with a Vestron and not Umbrella when it came to the Dagon release. And there's a number of Lovecraft inspired movies, man, going back to 1970 and the Dunwich Horror with, I can't remember, Dean Stanton, was it?
I think so.
He was in
Dean Stockwell.
Yeah, he was one of the Stooges in Beverly Hills Cop 2, wasn't it? Was it part 2 he was in?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think yeah. And then of course all the ones throughout the 70s, 60s even. When was Die Monster Die? That's 60s? Is that part of the 60s, yeah. And then of course the 80s were just, I mean, you had a lot of bad ones, but some good ones. And then maybe I think the last notable one we got was Color Out of Space, adaptation by Richard Stanley, which now, thank God, he's working on the Dunwich Horror in a 2-parter.
Nice.
Oh, not wait. Oh, that thing better find its. It better be completed. And it's not the who's the guy who's the stupid guy who plays Frodo?
Elijah Wood.
Elijah Wood, yeah. It's not his company, but it's the other company that also was part of Color Out of Space.
Yeah.
That company is behind him. So I don't know who's going to distribute it or however that's going to look. I'd be great if it got a theatrical in a 2-parter. That would be. But if he can get the same level of work he got on Color Out of Space, I can't even imagine what Dunwich Horror is going to look like. That's going to be.
Definitely.
Why we haven't gotten more Lovecraft is just beyond me.
I don't know.
I think it's like the thing is like, usually when you talk about Lovecraft, like there's always kind of like that thing between Lovecraft and Poe. And the problem is like with Lovecraft is like when you go to read Lovecraft, you really need to have a good analytical mind to read Lovecraft's work, because like Poe's is a little bit easier to, you can kind of get Poe's work easier, but it's like, like when it comes to reading Lovecraft, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of things you need to think about and all that kind of stuff. And I think just for a lot of people, it's like, it's too weird. It's too far out. It's too hard to understand. And, I think, when they tried to do like a lot of these adaptations, like back in the 80s and stuff like that, I think they, like Stuart Gordon and like when they did Unnameable and all that kind of stuff, I think what they really tried to do is they really tried to like make it make sense and everything else by just putting it into kind of like regular like horror context. I mean, if you look at like go watch the Unnameable, I mean, it's an incredibly short story, but the thing is, they almost turn it into this kind of horror slasher movie and everything because it's easier for the audience to understand it, And I think that's kind of the thing is like you really kind of like gotta put your thinking cap on when you read Lovecraft, because there's a lot going on in there that, it's not just surface level stuff. Whereas like Edgar Allan Poe, you could read his stuff and it's pretty easy to get. You could read Telltale Heart and it's not a hard story to figure out. But if you try to read something like At the Mountains of Madness or something like that, you're kind of like, there's some stuff here I'm kind of confused by. It's like some stuff isn't clicking, And so I think that has something to do with it. I think, just for a lot of people, I think for a lot of them, Poe is just kind of hard to adapt, or it's hard to try to like translate to people to get them to understand it,
Oh, 2 quick things. One, have you seen Robert Edgar's short Telltale Heart?
No, I haven't.
It's on YouTube. That is freaking fantastic.
Okay, I'll look for that.
Freaking 10. And then the other thing I just thought of is crap. The Robert Edgar's Telltale Heart, and seemed like there was. Dang it! I'm getting too old. God, I had 2 freaking things. It was. Anyways, maybe it'll come to me. Glenn, any last fleeting thoughts, recommendations, something?
The soundtracks for both of the Re-animator movies are coming out on cassette tape. So if anyone wants that, Terror Vision Recordings will put them out. So that's about it.
Just real quick, I just wanted to say, like, have either of you two watched when Stephen King had that limited series, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, on television? I think it was TNT or TBS, one of those.
I remember it. I think I watched some of it.
Mm-hmm. It's like, if you ever get a chance, Rob, if you haven't seen it yet, one of the episodes on there is called Crouch End. And being the Lovecraft fan that you are and everything, if you ever get a chance, if you can find it, watch that episode, because that is Stephen King, basically his love letter to Lovecraft. And I think, honestly, I think you would appreciate that. Maybe not, but I think if you ever get a chance or read the short story, that is, Stephen King literally said, like, I grew up reading Lovecraft. I love his stories. I love everything he's written. And he's like, I wanted to write something that is a true homage to Lovecraft. So if you ever get a chance, yeah, if you can find the episode, watch it, or at the very least read the short story, I think you might like it.
And you made me think about it when you just said that. The other thing I was going to say is, if you've never seen Jeffrey Combs play Edgar Allan Poe in The Black Cat, which was part of the Masters of Horror, that was out of this freaking world, man. Easily
that was brilliant the way that was done.
Yeah, the best
combination of adapting the story and Poe's biography. That was perfect. That was just a work of genius, in my opinion.
And that was Stuart Gordon, wasn't it?
Stuart Gordon, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jeffrey Combs was, what was it? Well, for anyone who doesn't know, Yuzna was the first movie that put him on the map was Society. That was a crazy, weird movie. Mm-hmm. But he also was known for Return of the Living Dead 3.
Oh, yeah.
The Dentist movies and Rottweiler. And I mean, there's a few more.
Don't forget Society.
Yeah.
Talk about Yuzna. You can't go without Society.
Yeah. Of course, the score, we didn't even talk about the score, but Richard Band, how awesome was freaking the score, man. Just kind of leaping off the Psycho theme and just doing something a little different. And this movie being I mean, it's funny we were doing it for Valentine's Day, but it did premiere at the Splatterfest Film Festival in the UK in February 1990. I don't know how close to the 16th or 14th that might have been, but yeah, I think that was it.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I was telling you guys about this one earlier. Beneath Still Waters. Brian Yuzna directed that one. Like I said, the CGI is absolute garbage, but it's like you definitely get that fun. You could definitely tell it's a Brian Yuzna film, especially when you're getting towards the third act. It definitely it does what a Brian Yuzna movie does. It goes completely off the rails and just goes chaos. So that one's kind of fun. Just like I said, the CGI is absolute trash in it.
And I just remember a little trivia. Well, it's not really trivia, but in 1990, this is so funny. Cat in the Brain comes out, and it's sort of Fulci's, nod to himself and his own life's work and everything. And it's funny how this film Bride really is a farewell to what is the decade of the greatest practical effects maybe we've ever had. I mean, this was a decade of, just amazing things. I mean, and much in the same way, I think probably can make an argument that in '89, Intruder says the farewell to what was the slasher of the '80s.
Yeah,
which was K&B's first real gig.
Yep.
Which probably led them into Bride of the Re-animator.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else. I mean, well, Nicotero worked with, he was on, I think Day of the Dead was his first gig with Romero. And that's where him and I think Berger met. And of course, it's not long after that K&B is born.
One thing I thought was funny, I forget which video it was, but that ending the Maniacal Cinephile on YouTube, he did a video. He's talking about, I think it was the Maniac remake. And he was talking about the original effects for Maniac were done by Tom Savini, and then the remake effects were done by K&B, which tells you they're top-notch effects and everything. And K&B has gone on to do, practical effects for so many movies. So they're kind of like rolling up this list and everything else. And then one of the characters goes, "Hey, give someone else a chance, asshole." Because basically talking about K&B does the effects for all the movies. Yeah. And stuff, and they're showing this big list of movies and everything. The characters like, "Hey, give someone else a chance, asshole."
Well, I think it was Nicotero. Maybe it was Berger who said something I heard recently. He said, their ride up the ladder was so quick and fast. He said, 1 minute you're on Bride of the Re-animator, next minute you're doing crap. What was that Kevin Costner Western movie that was like 8 hours long? Or not really, but
Wolves?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they built the buffalo
Yep.
Mhm.
in there, and so I mean, yeah, and they of course, I mean, can you say about Can being where they are today, and Nicotero and Walking Dead, and as a director and in his own right, I mean, but that was a great decade,
It was.
and it's still with us. I mean, to some degree, I mean, it really is still with us. So, all right. Well, before we sign off, we should have did this at the beginning. We forgot again, but BHS 82 apostrophe is where you can find me on my YouTube channel. Lonnie, you have a brand new channel.
Yeah, my old channel used to be called Terror and Tats, but now I had to start a new movie channel. It's called Mr. Macabre's Movie Library. You can find it on YouTube. So hopefully see you all there.
And I'm sure Glenn will put the show note, or at least put the channels on there.
Thank you.
Definitely, yeah. You can find me at BDG Reviews on YouTube. There you go.
And as long as everything goes well, a week from now, we'll be doing our next collaboration with Body Bags, and I think we decided on physical imports in our physical media collection. Top 5 roundtable discussion of physical imports, the stuff that we bought outside of this country, pays to be not region locked.
That's going to be.
I know I got to start looking. I wanted to get this done, and then I got to start looking at my collection. And I know, I've got plenty to choose from, but
Yeah,
I know it's
for
like.
me,
No, I was going to say spoiler, but it's like, I was telling you guys a while ago, it's like, I ordered the UK version of Life Force on 4K from Arrow. It's like, that's probably going to make it in my list somewhere, so spoilers.
you'll have
I
that
gave
by the
away
time we
one.
do the show.
Huh?
You'll have that by the time we do the show.
Yeah, I'm supposed to have it by Tuesday.
Wow.
So yeah,
Nice.
should be able to get it in and check it out. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Well, no, spoiler too. I mean, I'm sure. I don't know where it'll fall, but my UK edition of the Thing from Another World, just because it has John Carpenter's commentary track. That's going to be fun to talk about. I may have to revisit that before next Friday, because that's easily. I mean, I don't know, how does that not come over on the Blu-ray that came over here is beyond me.
Kind of hoping maybe one of these days, like, Scream Factory or somebody will be like, hey, wait a minute, let's redo, or maybe even do a 4K or something. We can include that on there.
Yeah.
Something like that. Maybe that'd be cool.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, if they could import, they could take all that bonus stuff that was done for Creepshow and put that on there. They could get the rights to Thing from Another World. Can't see why they can't. Maybe see if they could get the rights to that commentary and put that on there. That'd be nice.
Definitely.
It's funny. I don't know if it's would make it in my list at all. But you reminded me though, Lonnie, when I first got my Creepshow from the UK, it had Just Desserts on there.
Yeah.
But when it got released over here, they couldn't put it on there, so it got released on its own release as a doc.
Yep.
And I didn't even realize that. I mean, when I don't think I even realized that until everyone was making a big deal about Just Desserts getting a release, and I'm like, what is that? And then when I realized what it was, I went and looked on my comment. Oh, I got it already. Why is everyone crazy about it? That's why.
You guys remember a while back when we were talking about that one? We were just having a group chat and stuff. Remember I mentioned on there that one of the bonus features on there, they had the Tom Savini volume of Scream Greats on there, volume 1, and it had a commentary by Tom Savini. Remember the look on Jason's face when I said that? He was like, "What? It's on there?" Like, yeah, it's like it's Scream Greats volume 1. It's a bonus feature on there, and Tom Savini even does a commentary for it. So, I think Jason was thrilled about that one. He loved that.
Unless Glenn's got something, I know we keep saying this. One last thing, though, this is independent filmmaking. You guys did see that Deadbeat at Dawn is getting a special new re-release.
Yeah, I saw that.
Can't remember who's putting that out. but that looks pretty good. I mean, that's pretty independent, low independent filming. I think I reviewed that for Body Bags when we did it that one week.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't own it. I had to watch it on, I don't know, some streaming source wherever I found it, or can't remember. But that was interesting. So, anyways, Glenn, you want to just go ahead and close this up then?
Yeah, sure. So that is our episode. Again, like the last one, this will be on YouTube as well as on like Spotify and all those channels and all that other stuff. So yeah, check the show notes and there'll be links to our channels and everything. So yeah. Yep.
Have a good night, everybody.